You're listening to Mad Mike's Smile Time Variety Cast.
Welcome to the Smile Time Variety Cast, you idiots. This is Mad Mike here with you, and I'm so glad to be bringing this one back. For those of you who knew me before I got on YouTube, you would know that I had a radio show called the Smile Time Variety Hour back in college. It was so good that the fucking show actually won me an award for best radio show in the entire damn program. I was really proud of that show, and I took it as far as I possibly could, in the mainstream radio world anyway. Now that I'm somewhat making a name for myself on YouTube, I figured it's a good time to bring this shit back. So, what are we going to talk about here? Well, since my shtick on YouTube is metal and shit posting, that's exactly what this show is going to be. I got tons of January 2023 album reviews on the way, including new Obituary and Ahab, and later on in the show I'll be giving you a full review of Strapping Young Lad's Alien. That being said, right now I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my history as a metal fan. So, in case any of you don't know, I'm an 80s boy. The last 7 months of the 80s, anyways. I was born in April of 1989, the same year that classics like Beneath the Remains and Altars of Madness came out, and I was introduced to music at age 0, pretty much. First big band I really got into was Aerosmith. My parents introduced me to them, grew up loving them. Not exactly a metal band, but Aerosmith had an attitude to them, especially around that time. Pump had just came out, and it had this very sleazy, give no fucks attitude towards it. And my propensity to favor myself towards attitude-driven music was driven into me from a very young age, and that is why I eventually got into metal later on in life, and why I'm pretty much a full-blown metalhead now. So the first metal band I ever got into was Metallica. As I've said before, the first metal album I owned was the Black Album. I got it for Christmas from a friend one year, and it really piqued my curiosity. I eventually got Master of Puppets later on, and that album absolutely blew me the fuck away, and that is what led me down this rabbit hole. I eventually got Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, and Justice for All, the rest of Metallica's catalog at the time, including Saint Anger, and then I eventually started to branch myself off into getting into other metal bands. So Iron Maiden was next, Sabbath was after that, Megadeth was after that, Slayer, Anthrax, Judas Priest, Motorhead, and eventually after that I started to get into death metal, Cannibal Corpse, Death, Morbid Angel, Deicide, and that was what, like 15 to 20 years ago now? Fuck, I'm old. Eventually, I started to get my ear to the ground on what the modern scene at the time was doing. This was around 2006, 2007, 2008, something like that. And, I got into bands like Skeleton Witch, The Faceless, Goat Whore, Austrian Death Machine, 3 Inches of Blood, Arch Enemy, Amon Amarth, and of course the big ones, Opeth. And there's still probably a whole bunch of other metal bands I listened to at the time that, off the top of my head, I just can't remember right now. But by that time, I was a full-fledged metal fan, metalhead, whatever you want to call it. I was really into this music. And it's funny how, your environment and the music you listen to at a very, very young age really sets you on a course to eventually get into what you're into as an adult. I mean, I started with Aerosmith, and, not the most metal band, and they're not even a metal band, they're a hard rock band, but with the attitude they displayed, the music they played especially at that time, it was very hard-nosed, very sleazy, dirty, and had this give no fucks attitude. That's what I really loved about Aerosmith during that era, and I think looking back on it, that is what led me to get into metal, because metal had all of that. It had this give no fucks attitude. It had this dirtiness to it. It had this hard edge to it that I just really fell in love with. And, socially, I've never really been the most competent person, so really, it sounds weird, but metal, for all intents and purposes, was my first love, and to this day, it's my one and only. But that is my history as a metal fan, and that is why I bring this podcast to you now, to give you more of my love for this music. And I'll be talking about like other music on this podcast as well that isn't metal related. I might get into a little bit of rap, might get into a little bit of punk rock. I do have one punk rock album review today, but that is what this podcast is going to be about for the most part. Metal, and more metal. Sometimes I'll be talking about movies, sometimes I'll be talking about TV shows. Those are other loves I have in my life. And that's pretty much it for this segment of the show. Now we're getting ready for the next segment of this podcast, and it is what I call rapid fire album reviews. So how this segment of the show works is I take all of the albums that were released in this month that I listened to, review them in a rapid fire fashion, so quick little 1 minute, 1.5 minute reviews, and await all your hate in the comments. So the first January 2023 album we are reviewing is Obituary's Dying of Everything. So I just want to say this right out of the gate, I have never been a fan of Obituary. Even their supposedly landmark albums like Slowly We Rot or The End Complete, I thought they were just good. Nothing great. I respect them for being one of the early death metal pioneers, but outside of that, I was always more of a Deicide and Cannibal Corpse guy. Dying of Everything has been getting a lot of praise in the Discords I'm in, as well as from my fellow YouTubers, and I gotta say this album is solid. Yeah, it's solid. Nothing more, nothing less. There's some good songs and there's some not so good songs. Good riffs, forgettable riffs. It's solid. Unfortunately, solid is as far as this album goes. When I'm comparing this Obituary album to everything in the modern death metal scene, there are tons of modern death metal bands like Venom Prison, Shadow of Intent, Hath, Ripped to Shreds, and Undeath who run circles around these guys, both in terms of skill and songwriting. There's definitely some good songs on this album, like The Wrong Time, War, which has a really good groove to it. The title track has an anthemic structure to it, which I do like, and has a really groovy main riff. Unfortunately, none of the good stuff on this album rises above anything beyond just being good, and all the good stuff is weighed down by the more by the numbers and even forgettable stuff. While this is overall a solid album, it's just another death metal album released by a legacy act, and in my opinion, nothing really more. That being said, listen to the song War. That's a good one. And the next album up for reviews is Anti-Flag's The Lies They Tell Our Children. This is Anti-Flag's first album since 2020's 2020 Vision, and the punk rock legends show no signs of slowing down or aging. This album doesn't really give us anything we haven't heard before, but in Anti-Flag's case, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, just fuck the man even harder. They bring in a lot of guest stars on this, including Shane Todd of Silverstein, Jesse Leach of Killswitch, and Tim McIlrath of Rise Against, and they all fill up their backup vocal roles on this album well. This band is almost like the Cannibal Corpse of punk in my opinion. They haven't really changed their formula since they started, but they don't really need to. The government will never stop pissing them off, and thus they will never have to reinvent their wheel. And that's okay. That being said, I like the first half of this album more than the second half, even if the second half is still decent. I think most punk bands have this habit of front-loading their albums with all of their best material instead of spreading it out throughout the album's runtime, so it's something I'm kinda used to in this case. That's really my only big complaint here. If you want a good punk rock album by a legendary band that hasn't lost their mojo, this is the album for you. And up next is Funeral Doom Star's Ahab with The Coral Tombs. Not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest doom metal fan. There are some exceptions like Black Sabbath and early Candlemass, but overall this genre can be a real slog for me at times. And this album sadly falls into the slog category for me. Doom metal, and funeral doom metal as well, is a genre that is way too trapped in its own rules, and it doesn't allow itself room to grow beyond its inherent Black Sabbath worship, and this album is no different, sadly. Its runtime is more bloated than I am at a Chinese restaurant, and it spends most of that time plodding along with predictable melodies, overly simplistic riffs, drumming that would put its own drummer to sleep, dime a dozen death growls, and the most sleep-inducing cleans this side of Maynard James Keenan. None of the songs really stand out for me, and they go on about 9 minutes longer than any of them really should. I appreciate what the band is trying to go for, which is to be a very soothing, alone in your room at 3 a.m. and need to unwind type of band, but this just really isn't my thing. Sorry, Questy, but this album is a no from me, dog. So, on to Blackened Funeral Doom that's actually good. The next album is from an independent Russian black metal artist by the name of Rye. The album is called BCE. I'm not sure what that translates to in English, so forgive me. But anyways, this album is sort of an ambient, funeral doomy black metal album, and even though these genres aren't really my thing, I was surprised by this album. You know, there's good stuff and there's dog shit in every genre. Sometimes you just gotta dig for the good stuff, or more accurately, be introduced to the good stuff by people in your Discord who are way more knowledgeable than you are. As I've always said, I value songwriting and execution over every other aspect of music, and thankfully, none of the experimental ambience or depressive elements take away from the songs being played. The melodies are beautiful, the loud parts and quiet parts happen at the right times, and they're dynamic enough to keep your attention. And while it doesn't really break the mold in terms of originality, it's done well enough that it doesn't really matter. My only real criticism is that the songs are a little samey on the album, but that's to be expected because these genres have a very limited palette. This was a very pleasant surprise from an artist I've never heard before in a genre I'm not a real fan of. Rye is definitely on my radar now. And the last January release I am reviewing is Katatonia's Sky Void of Stars. This is the 12th studio album by these Swedish metal icons, and the band seems to be showing their age, unfortunately. Honestly, at most points during this album, I was getting the same feelings as when I heard Iron Maiden's Senjutsu, a tired slog of an album made by an aging band well past its prime and nothing much else to offer the scene. The only difference here is the songs are mercifully much shorter, so thank you for that at least. The last thing we need is grandpas giving us 10-minute songs. There are a couple of decent tracks on here like Drab Moon, Austerity, and Author, but overall I find the album to be mid. Mid songs, mid riffs, mid vocals, mid drumming, and ultimately a mid album. It sounds like any other doomy, proggy goth album out there. I'd suggest skipping this one if you haven't gotten around to this yet. So sorry about this, but Katatonia wins my most disappointing album of January award. Alright, so that's it for my January album reviews. Rye wins the month for me. Seriously, check that one out. Anyways, before I move on, I want to let you know which albums I'll be reviewing and anticipating for February. So the albums I'll be reviewing next month, but not really anticipating, are as follows. Saggy Sugar Bong with Homicidal Ecstasy. Honestly, I just wasn't really a big fan of the last one, and I'm not really looking forward to this one either, but I like to give everything a fair chance, so I will be reviewing Homicidal Ecstasy. I'm also going to be reviewing Foregone by In Flames, even though I can't stand that fucking band. And the singles I've heard so far just sound like In Flames, incredibly fucking mid, and I expect the rest of the album to be incredibly fucking mid. But who knows, maybe I'll be surprised. I'll also be reviewing This Is Why by Paramore, even though they haven't made anything good since Riot. The Jaws of Life by Pierce the Veil, because I need a good laugh. Bible Bashers by Deicide, even though they haven't made anything relevant in almost 30 years. And also, I'll be reviewing Steel Panthers On the Prowl, because again, I need a good laugh. Now for my most anticipated albums in February of 2023. The first one is Anno 1696 by Insomnium. I'm also anticipating Warlocks Grim and Withered Hags by Hellripper. I've really liked what I've heard from that one so far. And my most anticipated album for February of 2023 is Judgment Day by Love Bites. These girls are a pretty big name in the power metal scene. I love the singles so far. Judgment Day is just fucking heavy as balls, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the album. So those are the albums you can look forward to me reviewing in the next episode. So I have a classic album review on the way, but before I get to that, I want to give a shout out to a company that I am a big fan of. I am not sponsored by this company. They are not paying me to fucking shout them out, so don't accuse me of selling out right now or anything. I'm doing this because I think this company is cool. They make good shit, and I think more people need to know about it. And that company is Nemesis Now. So if you've watched some of my recent videos, you've seen me drink beer out of a Motorhead mug. You've also seen me drink water out of a Metallica Master of Puppets chalice, and people in the comments have said, I want that fucking mug, I want that fucking cup, and Nemesis Now is where I've got them from. It's a pretty cool company that sells a lot of really cool metal items. They have the aforementioned Motorhead mug, the Metallica Master of Puppets chalice. They also have a Master of Puppets mug. They have a Iron Maiden Trooper mug, which I thought looked so cool. I was going to get that one, but I decided on the Motorhead mug ultimately. They also make Metallica, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest shot glasses as well. They look really fucking cool. All of their stuff is handmade, hand painted, and made with extreme care. I really like what I've gotten from them so far, and when I get the money, I'm gonna continue shopping from them. They make a lot of cool shit. They don't just make metal-centric stuff either. They make movie-centric stuff. There's some Terminator 2 merch on that website that I really plan on getting at some point. The stuff they make is pretty expensive. That being said, it is so fucking worth it. So check them out if you want cool metal merch. I'll leave a link to the website in the comments. And that is my shout out to Nemesis Now. Again, they are not sponsoring me. I am not getting paid by them to promote this. I am doing this out of the goodness of my heart and because I want the scene to grow. And a good way to get the scene to grow is to buy some fucking merch. And you guys should check this website out. So Nemesis Now, check them out. So the first classic metal album I'll be reviewing for this podcast is Strapping Young Lad's Alien. Here's a bit of background information to start. Strapping Young Lad was founded by Devin Townsend in 1994. It was originally a one-man band, and that remained so on the debut album, Heavy as a Really Heavy Thing. By the time City had come out in 1997, Strapping had a four-man lineup that consisted of Devi, Jed Simon on guitars, Byron Stroud on bass, and the human drumming machine himself, Gene Hoglan. Together, this lineup released 4 albums, including the aforementioned City, the self-titled album in 2003, Alien in 2005, which I'll be getting to, and The New Black in 2006. The band had a very chaotic, angry fusion of industrial, thrash, and extreme metal. Devin Townsend also had his skullet at the time, which meant he was this really pissed off badass who took nobody's shit, and that attitude is taken to its absolute apex on the album we are talking about today, Alien. So, right off the bat, this is one of my top 50 metal albums of all time. I did have Empath on that list as the token Devi pick, but after re-listening to this one, I have to switch out Empath with Alien. And why is that? Well, first off, this is a relentless assault on your senses for 55 fucking minutes, and at no point does it overstay its welcome, even during the final track, Info Dump, which is just an experimental noise song. Right from the beginning of the album, you're taken on an adventure into Devin Townsend's mind, which was a complete mess at the time, more on that later. And the album doesn't feel its length because you're so fascinated at what's going on in his head. The way he engrosses you into the music and the stories he is telling is borderline cinematic, and that's something I find to be really overlooked about this album and, well, Devin Townsend in general, and that's the story being told. We know about the riffs. We know about the amazing drumming by Gene Hoglan. We know the incredibly angsty and pissed off vocal performance from Devi, but it's all in service of the story being told. Devin is taking you on a journey with Alien, and the journey he's taking you on is through his, at the time, very messed up mind. So, some background on that. Back in 1998, about 7 years before Alien came out, Devi was diagnosed as bipolar. He was an alcohol and drug user at the time, which I'm sure exacerbated the issue, and he was also given antipsychotic medication for his bipolar disorder, which I'm sure gelled really well with what he was already doing. Anyways, he started doubting his diagnosis right around the time this album was being written, and he decided to give up his meds, but still do all the other shit. This, of course, completely fucked him up, and it led to the mental roller coaster that is this album. And This is what I love about this album more than anything else. It's a completely emotionally honest expression of the artist's state of mind. Now, sometimes that doesn't work, but the difference here is that everything around the emotional state being expressed is fucking awesome. Seriously, the riffs, the solos, the drumming, the industrial ambience, the vocals, the production is all so fucking awesome, so fucking intense, and so fucking chaotic. The music is just as all over the place as Devi's mindset at the time, and it all comes together to create one of the most unhinged listening experiences in the history of metal in the best possible way. One of the main lyrical themes here is love, and more specifically, intimate love. The kind of love you have for a life partner. And you can see this most, fittingly enough, on the song Love, ? It is, from my interpretation anyways, a song about how love is a chemical reaction in our brains that incentivizes us into procreation. You can see it in the opening lyrics. Love is a way of feeling. Love is a way of feeling less alone. So what's all the fuss about? Fuck it. Love. The paradox of needing. Oh, love. Make way for breeding. It really simplifies the concept of love to its most basic functions in a way that feels earnest. You can see this theme in other songs as well, like the song We Ride, which is, from my perspective, a song about an unhappy couple that just fucks their problems away. This is made clear because the lyrics are basically a dude arguing with his partner, all the way up until the line, "Put it in gear, motherfucker, for tonight we ride." Hey, it's an Unleash the Archers reference about 10 years before that song. I could be misinterpreting these lyrics, and maybe there's a much deeper meaning behind them, but this is just what I see. Another lyrical theme on here is pretty much insecurity and vulnerability in regards to your demons. You see this on tracks like Skeksis, where he's basically having a mental breakdown in word form, and he tries to sort it out in the same song, but he can't. Hence the "everything about this is fucked" line. These themes all come to a head in the final track, which is an instrumental, funnily enough. Somehow, in this 11-minute experimental noise song, Devi is telling us more about his mental state than any other track on the album, despite not saying a single word. It almost feels like a computer malfunctioning left and right, and it's trying to reset itself into normal mode, but it can't. It's an auditory representation of a panic attack, and no matter how hard his mind is trying to fix it, it's just getting worse and worse. It's such a powerful moment, and it ends the album on such a haunting note. In conclusion, this album is one of the most brutally honest expressions of mental illness in the history of music. The music is masterful as well, but what stands out to me the most is the story Devin is telling us. It's the best album Devin Townsend has ever made across any of his projects, and it is one of my favorite albums of all time. Alright, we're almost done this first episode. I got one last thing I want to get off my chest before we are done, but before I get to that, I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine by the name of Phil Michaels. He just opened up a pizza parlor, and he wants to tell you about it.
Hello, Niagara. If you're stupid enough to fall for an obvious phony who can't cook if his life depended on it, then come on down to Phil Michaels Pizzeria. Dough made out of sawdust, expired pepperoni, moldy cheese. I've got it all, and at a very low price of $79.99. We have all the toppings in the world for you. Meat lovers pizza? We got it. French fries and Oreos? We got it. Maggots and cockroaches? Oh, you better believe we got it. Pineapple? How about no? Come on down to Phil Michaels Pizzeria while you still can before Health Canada shuts me down. But wait, there's more! This month only, ask me about my DIY deal. How does it work? We give you all the ingredients prepackaged and uncooked so you can take home and bake yourself. And for just $15 extra, we'll bake it for you because your wife can't bake worth squat. Guaranteed! Phil Michaels Pizzeria. Come see this fella, get salmonella. Come on down!
So yeah, if you guys are mad at me and you want to fly to the Niagara region to punch me in the face, stop at this pizza place first. I'm sure you will have one of the pizzas of all time. Alright, this is the part you've all been waiting for. The part of the show where I rant about something in the metal scene that annoys me. I don't know about anyone else, but I've been in the following scenarios multiple times.
Have you heard about this band called Shit Piss McFucknuts?
No.
What the fuck, man? You call yourself a metalhead? You don't know that? What the fuck? It's fucking shit.
Or,
hey, have you heard of this band called Shit Piss McFucknuts?
yeah.
Do you like them?
Nah, they're not my thing.
What the fucking fuck, you motherfucker, answer that!
Or,
Hey, have you heard of this band called Shit Piss McFucknuts?
yeah.
Do you like them?
Yeah, I do.
Do you think everything they've done is perfect?
No, but you can't really say that about any band, to be fair.
What the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is you fucking poser, fucking shit, I fucking hate you, motherfucker!
Or,
Hey, have you heard of this band called Shit Piss McFucknuts?
yeah.
Do you like them?
Yeah, I do.
Do you think everything they've done is perfect?
Absolutely. I think they're one of the greatest bands ever.
That's awesome, dude. So what do you think about this other band, Ass Fuck McTittycum?
Not a fan.
What the fuck, man? You fucking fucker! I fucking hate you! You so fucking poser! I fucking hate you!
Alright, I think you get my point by now. Some people in this scene, and by some people I mean most, can get really fucking pushy with their tastes. It happens all the time. You meet with some self-righteous knucklehead who thinks he's better than you. He starts shoving 15 metal bands you've never heard of down your fucking throat, and when you don't react to it the way he wants you to, he loses his goddamn mind. And yes, I'm saying he in this scenario because it is always a male who does this kind of shit. I have never met a female metal elitist in my entire fucking life. Because guess what? They have way more sense than we do. And yes, I'm just saying that to get laid. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, elitists who shove music down your throat. Alright, so it is absolutely annoying when this happens. One, because they always try to introduce you to like 15 bands at once when you haven't listened to metal in your life. Two, because they introduce you to the worst possible bands to introduce someone to metal with. Yeah, recommend Pig Destroyer to a Selena Gomez fan. Good luck. Three, they don't even know the already existing tastes of the people they're introducing this music to. And four, and this is the most annoying one, they act like a fucking petulant child when you don't like it. Yeah, that's right, get pissed at them. That's totally gonna win them over. So anyways, if you're a non-metalhead and you encounter a metalhead who is way too fucking pushy with his music, run. The guy is unhinged and your mental health will thank you. That being said, if you are a metalhead and you want to get more non-metalheads into this music, here are the right ways to do it. Number 1, get to know the person. You'd be surprised at how much easier it is to win someone over when you talk to them like a human being and not like you're trying to sell them a beat-up Pinto. Talk to them. Ask them questions. Learn about their wants and faux pas, their likes and dislikes, their taste in movies and music, their favorite foods, everything. This will make choosing bands to introduce them to a lot easier. Which brings me to my next point. Number 2, introduce them to something as familiar with their already existing tastes as possible. If you get to know the person and the heaviest music they listen to is Katy Perry, I wouldn't suggest introducing them to Cattle Decap or Wormrot. That's not exactly going to win them over, and they're likely going to change the conversation subject back to, "Why are you in my shower again?" And you can't allow that to happen because then you'll go to jail. So the way to avoid this is to introduce them to something familiar. This is why pop metal exists. If they like stuff like Katy Perry or Cardi B or Jennifer Lopez, introduce them to something like Sumo Psycho or Poppy or Baby Metal or Diablo Swing Orchestra. Maybe not Electric Callboy just yet, but that could be a band you introduce them to after they've familiarized themselves with the bands I just mentioned. Do it gradually, guys. Number 3, don't alienate their already existing tastes. So, a lot of people are guilty of this, not just in metal, but in movies too. Sorry, Martin Scorsese. What you said wasn't exactly wrong, but you're not gonna win Marvel fans over if you make them feel stupid for what they like. They're likely to hate watch The Irishman now instead of appreciating it for the fine piece of art that it is. And this logic applies to metal as well. I recently saw a meme where a new metalhead claimed X was his favorite band, and then he proceeded to get his ass kicked by online metalheads and gatekeepers. Yeah, you go, tough guys. That's totally gonna help that person become more engrossed in this scene. Treat them like garbage. The beatings will continue until tastes improve. If you're like this and you agree with this elitist way of thinking, I immediately start to believe you have a small penis. Don't fucking do this, please. I want this scene to grow. I want metal to be the most popular form of music in the world, and we're not gonna do this by alienating every outsider we see and treating people who only listen to a handful of popular metal bands like shit. Number 4, introduce them gradually. Don't shove 15 fucking bands down their throat at once. Keep it at 2 to 3 bands tops and go from there. You don't want to overwhelm somebody and make this feel like work to them, because if you do, they will not likely get around to all 20,000 bands you introduce them to because A, they have their own lives they're busy with, B, they have their own music like Eminem and Imagine Dragons to listen to, and C, overwhelming them like this will likely make them want to change the subject, and then they'll go back to asking you why you were watching them through their window last night. And you can't have that because your record's already a mile high. Number 5, don't push the issue if they don't want to learn. You're just gonna have to accept that some people are just not going to be into this music. They're not gonna respond well to the bands you introduce them to, and they'll go back to listening to whatever music they already enjoyed. And that's okay. You tried your best and you failed miserably. So just let it go and continue stalking them from afar. And finally, number 6, and this is the most important one to remember, don't be an asshole. Please don't lose your fucking mind if people don't have the same tastes as you and they don't like the stuff you like, okay? Like, you're not gonna win non-metalheads over by being ball-busting, condescending pricks to them and treating them like shit. Be a fucking human being. I'm absolutely sick of this asshole behavior in this community. Stop it. Treat people like, people. And maybe this scene will grow. Anyways, that's my rant. Okay, so before I say goodbye to you all today, I am going to give you one final segment, and that is the Q&A. So what I do here is I answer questions that were asked by people in my Discord. If you want to ask me a question yourself in the future, you can join my Discord. I will leave a link in the comments below. It is called Mad Mike Space Mafia. You might not find the place in the Discord where you can ask the questions. I don't have that open to everybody, but I might open that to everyone in the future, depending on how I feel about this segment in the podcast. I'm still testing the waters with this one here. So let's get on with the questions. The first question is from Toxic Rooster 84, and he asks, what is your favorite thrash album outside of Sepultura, Enforced, Spirit World, The Big Four, and The Big Teutonic Four? Well, Rooster, that is a very, very good question, and I do have an answer for that, but before I get to that answer, I do want to mention a couple other thrash albums outside of those bands and movements that I really liked. One of them is Breathing the Fire by Skeleton Witch. Skeleton Witch is a blackened thrash band out of Ohio, and to me, Breathing the Fire is their masterpiece. They have never been able to even touch that album ever since, and it's unfortunate to hear where they are now. They kind of fell off after Chance left the band, but to me, Breathing the Fire was their absolute peak. I love Repulsive Salvation, Crushed Beyond Dust, Stand, Fight, and Die, Released from the Catacombs, and Into the Flame, Longing for Domination. Like, this album is fucking full of bangers, and I suggest anyone who hasn't listened to it yet, check that one out. Love that one. It's one of my top 50 metal albums of all time. Another thrash album outside of those bands and movements that I do want to mention is Artillery's By Inheritance. That to me is one of the best albums of 1990, definitely a top 10 of that year, and that was one fuck of a year for metal, right? And the album has this very Eastern music inspired feel to it, especially on the first couple of tracks, 7 O'Clock from Tashkent and Comaniac. I also love Beneath the Clay, R.I.P. Bomb Food's a fucking banger. Love their fucking cover of Razamanaz. So yeah, that is another album outside of those bands and movements that Rooster mentioned that I really, really love. One of the best thrash albums of all time. That being said, my favorite thrash album outside of Sepultura, Enforced, Spirit World, The Big Four, and the Teutonic Big Four is Alice in Hell by Annihilator. That is an album I can just listen to from front to back and not get tired of a single song. Jeff Waters was just a fucking riff machine on this album. Like, every guitar lick he has on this thing, like, sticks out in my head. That opening track, Crystal Ann, is just an acoustical masterpiece. Allison Hell, technically not the title track because it's spelled a little bit differently, but that song is just one of the greatest thrash songs of all time. And then the album ends with Human Insecticide, which is a Damage Inc. gung-ho style song that's just like really fast, really in your face, and it ends the album on that note, leaving you wanting more. To me, it's a Canadian thrash masterpiece. And yes, I'm biased towards this album, being a Canadian myself. I just gotta go for the Canadian thrashterpiece here. So yeah, that is my favorite thrash album outside of those bands and movements that Rooster mentioned. Allison Hell by Annihilator. Check that one out if you never have, for whatever reason. It's one of the greatest metal albums of all time. It's a top 50 for me, for sure. Maybe even a top 20 for me. So, the next question is by Grace_Omega. Do you have a favorite thing to do outside? Touching grass. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Actually, funny enough, one of my favorite things to do outside is to just walk with my headphones on and jam to music. Really. I like going out for walks a lot. I know I don't look like I do because of my size. I eat a little too much pizza, whatever. But yeah, that is a favorite thing to do outside. I like to go for walks, put my headphones on, put my Spotify on my fucking phone, turn on that damn music, and just start jamming. So that's what I like to do. Thank you very much for your question, Grace. And the final question is from Fred Durst Simp, aka Blackwater Rust, and he asks, what is the worst movie you have ever seen in theaters? The worst movie I have ever seen in theaters is also the worst movie I have ever seen. It is Alvin and the Chipmunks. That movie is fucking pain. Pure fucking pain. I was dragged to that movie in theaters by Donnie, the D&M Boys, and our other friend Frank. And to this day, I don't think I've ever forgiven them. Those voices were so high and fucking screechy. The jokes were painful and fucking cringe. The plot is generic. And all the fucking performances just make me want to barf. Jason Lee has clearly done better, and I am perfectly happy never seeing that giant piece of shit ever again. I would rather watch Batman and Robin, The Room, any Neil Breen movie over that fucking trash, because at least I can laugh at those movies. This one, I can't. It was pain. It was cringe. I was waiting for it to stop. Please fucking stop. Why am I fucking talking about it in the present tense now? Why? I am right back in that fucking theater. It was so fucking traumatic. I never want to see that piece of shit again. Why are we even fucking talking about this? Why did you ask me that question? Why? We're just not gonna fucking talk about this. So that's it for the Q&A segment. Again, if you ever want to ask a question, feel free to do so in my Discord in the chat titled Podcast Questions. It's not open to everybody just yet. I might do that in the future. I might not, depending how this goes. But that is it for the Q&A, and thus the final segment of today's podcast is over. All right, and that's it for the first episode of Mad Mike's Smile Time Variety Cast. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode, which will be February 28th. Au revoir, tabarnak.